Have you ever actually tried to hold a complex idea in your head without using any words? I mean, just take a second right now. Try to picture a really complicated plan, or maybe a deep philosophical thought, but completely strip away your inner dialogue. It's nearly impossible, isn't it? We usually just think of language as a way to talk to each other, the physical act of making sounds. But the truth is way more profound than that. Language is actually an invisible superpower. It's the very scaffolding of our thoughts, the core framework we literally use to understand the world around us.
Welcome to This Explainer. Our goal today is to demystify one of the absolute most incredible transformations in human existence. We're talking about how a crying, completely defenseless newborn turns into a highly articulate, concept-grasping 5-year-old. It happens so naturally that we kind of just take it for granted, right? But the sequence of events happening inside that developing brain is nothing short of miraculous.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The magic of language, 2. The timeline of talking, 3. The mind's journey, and finally 4. When the system glitches. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the magic of language, focusing on functions and priorities. At its absolute core, language is essentially a set of arbitrary symbols. It's basically just sounds, sounds and squiggles, that don't inherently mean anything on their own, but they're arranged in an agreed-upon order so we can convey messages. But what does it actually do for the human mind? There are 4 primary functions here. Now, the first one is pretty obvious: communicating ideas to others. It's the tool we use to share our thoughts and our emotions. But look at these next 3. Language allows for the formation of concepts. It gives us the ability to analyze complex ideas. And maybe most fascinatingly, it helps us focus our attention on ideas that would otherwise just be way too difficult to keep in our heads. Without the mental handle of a word or a sentence, those complex thoughts would just slip right through our cognitive grasp. So getting this superpower down follows a very strict order of priority. It always progresses from listening to speaking to reading and finally writing. This LSRW sequence is hardwired right into human development. And here's a super vital fact drawn directly from our source material. The most crucial period of speech and language development for us humans is the first 3 years of life. Those first 36 months are the critical window where this entire foundation is built. Moving right along to Section 2, the timeline of talking, covering birth to 5 years. Let's see how this actually builds in the real world, tracking those external milestones through the absolute whirlwind of the first year. So, at birth, language is practically absent. But just 4 weeks in, we start to notice these small, throaty sounds. By 16 weeks, the true starting point kicks in, with distinct crying, smiling, and what we call the cooing stage. At around 28 weeks, the baby enters the babbling stage. But watch what happens at 40 weeks. This is a monumental leap. The baby starts imitating the sounds made by adults. They take those external sounds into their own internal system, and they produce their very first word. This is called a holophrase. By 52 weeks, exactly a year in, that single word multiplies into 2 or more words. And man, the momentum just explodes from there. By 18 months, the baby is combining words to form basic sentence patterns. At 24 months, they're using simple phrases and actually successfully understanding simple directions. Then we hit 36 months, and there is a tremendous vocabulary boom. The child is now talking in full sentences and answering simple questions. By 4 years old, they are demonstrating complex grammar using conjunctions and understanding prepositions. Finally, by age 5, the child speaks clearly without infantile articulation. In just 5 years, they've essentially mastered the mechanics of human communication. It's incredible. Now for Section 3, the mind's journey, exploring the 4 stages of development.
All right, now let's look under the hood at the internal psychological stages of this development. The first phase is known as the primitive stage. This maps roughly to the earliest parts of our timeline. During this stage, vocalization is entirely raw and unfiltered. The baby cries, babbles, and produces basic sounds, really just testing out their vocal cords and reacting instinctually to their environment.
Next, they enter a truly fascinating period called the naive stage. During this phase, the child starts uttering words without actually knowing their meaning or their linguistic functions. They're essentially throwing sounds at the wall to see what sticks. The child identifies the meaning of what they just said entirely from the responses of the adults around them. They make what we call naive sentences, relying completely on the feedback loop of the external world to assign value to their vocalizations.
As they grow, they transition into the external stage. Here, the child begins using physical objects, like their favorite toys or even their own fingers, to indicate meaning in words in the external environment. If you've ever watched a child count by tapping their fingers one by one, or maybe use a toy block to represent a car while they speak, you are witnessing the external stage in action. They literally need the physical world to help them anchor the abstract concepts of language. And that leads us to the ultimate cognitive milestone, the ingrowth stage. This is the final stage of language development. Here, the child takes everything they've been doing externally and internalizes it. The perfect example from our source material is counting. Instead of counting aloud and using their fingers, the child begins to count silently in their head. The external action has grown inward, becoming internal thought. They've officially hacked the superpower.
Section 4, when the system glitches, understanding speech defects. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can look clinically but compassionately at the physiological and neurological glitches that can occur. Understanding speech defects gives us some incredible insight into just how delicate this whole language system really is. Because it relies on such a precise coordination of neurology and musculature, several distinct defects can pop up. Stuttering, or stammering, is an interruption in the flow of speech. It happens through involuntary repetition, prolonging of sounds, or wrong pauses, and it's notably often accompanied by facial expressions. Lisping involves difficulty pronouncing certain words correctly, kind of changing the sounds of letters. Interestingly, its main cause is often simply the continuity of that infantile mode of speech we talked about earlier, or maybe a defect in a speech organ. Slurring is caused by running words together, which prevents correct pronunciation. Muteness is the complete inability to speak. And dysprosody, this one is fascinating, is a voice disorder that affects the very musicality of our speech, creating changes in intensity, timing, rhythm, and intonation.
To truly understand how specific these glitches can get, let's compare apraxia and dysarthria. These might sound similar, but they are fundamentally different. Apraxia is an issue of sequencing. It refers to the wrong production and wrong sequencing of sounds and words. For example, a child with apraxia might pronounce the word potato as topato, or bed as deb. The brain actually has the right sounds, but it just shuffles the order. Dysarthria, on the other hand, is a muscular issue. It refers to speech production issues resulting directly from the weakness of the speech muscles themselves, which is caused by neurological defects. So, one is a sequencing error and the other is a physical weakness. So, we've covered the functions, the rapid timeline, the internal cognitive stages, and the complex vulnerabilities of speech. It is a monumental journey from a primitive cry to a silent, internalized thought, which leaves us with this final question to consider. If the most crucial period of speech and language development, the very tool you use to analyze complex ideas and form your understanding of the world, is heavily locked in during those first 3 years of life, how much of your current reality, your inner voice, and your deep thoughts are built entirely on those early invisible cognitive milestones? Think about that the next time you silently debate an idea in your head. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible world inside your own mind.